Greetings, gardeners. Well, this video is all about gardening with hurricanes. First question, though, is where the heck is Hector? Hector was heading this way across the Pacific Ocean from Mexico. It had us on a hurricane watch, but they just canceled that. And things here are becoming hurricane normal on the Big Island. Most of the time, when these hurricane systems move across the Pacific, most of the time what happens here is the trade winds stop. It gets really muggy, the air gets thick, nothing moves, and it often rains a lot. It's very seldom does anything more exciting than that happen when a hurricane's passing by. The Big Island, if you take a look at NOAA's research and their charts on the web, you'll see that the Big Island has actually never been hit by a hurricane in all recorded history. They come this way and they pass by all the time, but we're undesirable. If I was to look at it from the viewpoint of Pele, our volcano goddess, I'd say, well, this is an island of fire and lava. These water spirits got no business coming ashore. Here, go away. But actually, there's a good scientific explanation. The first time I saw these charts, I went, wow. I mean, it was a real head scratcher, because you see dozens and dozens of these hurricanes on their graphs that came at the Hawaiian Islands over the years, and every one of them turns around the bottom of the Big Island, misses it, and then starts heading straight for Oahu and Kauai especially. The reason why that happens, it's really pretty basic. The Big Island is, if you measure it from the seafloor, the largest mountain on the face of this planet. I think 33,000 feet, something on that order. I don't quite recall, but it's big. And the sides of the island go down just like a massive mountain to the bottom of the seafloor. And so we have this enormous amount of very cold, deep Pacific water just offshore here. And so as a hurricane moves in, they feed on warm water, and they get near this island, and there's all this upwelling of cold stuff from underneath. They're not happy with it, and so they just physically, naturally will turn away from this space, looking for warmer water. And of course they find it when they get up to Oahu or Kauai, because out that way the islands are heavily eroded, and they have nice, flat, warm, shallow seas offshore. We don't have that. We got this abrupt drop off into the bottom of the ocean, and so it makes us rather hurricane proof. Now, there have been a few that have brushed the island, come close enough that the tropical force winds cause some problems. My coffee plants, the young ones, got blown over at a 45-degree angle a few years ago because of one that came by. We had a whole lot of weak wooded trees on the island break up down in Lower Puna. Same basic area where the lava is at right now. They had albizia trees all over the roads. Things are so fragile, they're weed species. Thing came near the island, they just all broke and collapsed. They did more damage by snapping power lines, snapping electric telephone lines and so on, than any windstorm. It was just these weak trees falling over that really made a mess. We had one come in near South Point there a while back, but it was downgraded to a tropical storm by the time it hit the island. It's kind of sad too, because I believe I was paying about $900 a year for hurricane insurance, and I kept arguing that there's no record of hurricanes ever having hit this island. And at the time I had a loan on the property, and so the bank dictated what it was that I would do, and the bank was out of Oahu where they have hurricanes, and so they weren't going to listen to me. Well, once we managed to pay the note off, and so we owned the place lock, stock, and barrel, that was one of the first policies that I canceled. After checking with my agent, I said, you know, that hurricane that came in as a Category 1 down near Pahala a couple of years ago, when it hit shore, the Weather Service said that it was no longer a hurricane, it was a tropical storm. But it had been a hurricane till just before it hit the shore. I said, now if I was in a situation like that and my house got damaged and I had hurricane insurance, will you guys pay? And he said, if it's not a hurricane when it hits land, you don't get paid up. So I said, wow, I'm paying you guys $900 a year for this? You gotta be kidding me. Get out of here. So I canceled it. Of course, things could always change. You know, there are a few strange, freaky scientific types out there that believe in global warming and that the Pacific Ocean's getting warmer, you know, and so on, and there's weather changes. And so if you're one of those, science-minded kind of guys, and who doesn't listen to the president, then maybe we should worry. Maybe one of these days hurricanes will start hitting the island if the ocean gets warmer. We don't know. For the meantime, though, not a big deal here. As you can see, Hector is passing by at this very moment. Like I say, this is quite typical of what happens when the hurricanes come by here. It gets really still. I just felt a small breeze. It was kind of nice because it really gets dead. So, I had a serious question from one of the viewers the other day, though, and that was if I had any suggestions about what to do, particularly with the garden when there's hurricanes. And, well, you know, having been born in Chicago, that's one of those situations where we just say, you know, well, bend over and kiss the seat of your pants goodbye, because there isn't a lot you can do in the presence of something like that. But you know, you've got all your basic things. And one, for sure, any loose debris laying around out there in the garden, anything that's not nailed down, you want to get it cleaned up because it will become missiles, which is one reason I don't recommend really doing anything with the garden at all, because most likely whatever you do out there could possibly pick up and start flying. You don't want to see that. You know, you try to cover a tomato plant up with a 5-gallon bucket and have the bucket come through your picture window of your house. No, I'd rather risk the tomato, thank you. You know, but you know, you got all these basic types of things here in Hawaii. The number one thing to worry about, whether they hit or do not hit, whether they're tropical storms, and no matter what, our power grid, similar to Puerto Rico, is at risk because here everything is above ground. We don't have buried lines, and so it's all up in the air. We have a lot of trees around the island, and there are still a lot of very weak-wooded weed species growing here, like albizia, that will crack as soon as any decent wind gets going. And so, of course, they fall on the lines. And so, you know, having some sort of an energy backup, because if anything really hit here, we could be out for weeks. I mean, Puerto Rico is still trying to get all the power on, you know, after that hurricane. Now, I don't think we'll ever experience anything quite like that here, but our grid is very susceptible. And so if you don't have, you know, solar off grid, or if you don't have battery backup solar to your electrical, then I guess you best either get yourself a generator or have alternative energy sources. I mean, for instance, a regular Coleman camp stove that runs on propane, if ordinarily you cook with electricity, that camp stove will take you a long ways when it comes to making a pot of coffee the morning after a hurricane knocked all the wires down. And of course, what good is a garden if you got to eat everything that comes out of it raw? Well, there's a lot of great raw food out there, but I enjoy, you know, my snap beans cooked. Thank you. So, you know, having energy worrying about having energy, having enough flashlights, enough extra batteries around, making sure that the batteries in all your flashlights are in good condition and not corroded, changing them out every now and then, having energy for some kind of communication devices. You know, I mean, some of the guys here on the island have ham radios, so this is a good thing to have if you get the power to run the thing. You know, and just a plain old transistor radio, though, AM, FM, maybe one with a weather band or a couple other bands on it, great thing to have. Particularly one that runs off solar energy, because then you've got a backup. Yeah, so being prepared for the power being out, I'd say, is probably the number one. Around here, water's not such a big deal, because if we leave a bucket out in the yard, most of the time it'll fill up. But having vessels to hold extra water in could also be handy. You never know what's going to happen there. But, you know, yeah, these are basic things. It's just like if you live in California, you know, you need to be prepared for an earthquake to come. Here, you know, you worry about hurricanes, tsunamis, I don't know, various different things you can worry over. And having extra food around that's non-perishable, because, you know, if the power goes down, you're off, you lose your refrigeration, things can go bad real quick. You know, getting in there and taking a lot of the frozen food that you have and beginning to put it inside the refrigerator to keep the refrigerated food cold, and then gradually cooking down everything, because cooking, of course, will help preserve foods. You know. But, yes, you know, backup food, backup medical supplies, all good stuff that you want to have around. Don't forget to have, you know, your favorite beverages around. I mean, beer is probably my number one, but man, warm beer, nah. So, you know, I'd recommend a bottle of rum, local stuff, Old Lahaina, excellent brand from Maui, definitely. Rum doesn't matter whether it's room temperature, whether it's iced, it's all good. Stuff's like fire anyway. I wander out in the field, find a pineapple, crush that thing, pour it into a pitcher with that rum. Ah, yeah, that'll get you through any hurricane. As far as gardens and plants are concerned, there is not a whole lot of anything here. Plants that are up high, you know, hanging basket plants are very susceptible. Plants that are tied into trees, plants that are staked up artificially, things that are on trellises, these are all far more susceptible to damage when you get a storm like that. The taller and the more leaves and the broader this thing is, more likely it is to become a sail. So that's something to concern yourself with. You know, fruit trees, well, planting dwarf fruit trees, keeping the canopies low is going to help a lot. If you have big, tall, straight trunks and then big canopies on top, chances are they're going to come flying over. But if the canopies are low, squat, close to the ground, a lot of times the wind will move over the top of them rather than catching them. So these are thoughts. You know, your cucumbers, your beans and things, your blackberries that are on trellises, of course, are at risk. Here, the prevailing winds are from east to west, and so if your trellises are running in line with east to west, they're less likely to be beat. You know, if they're going north to south, so they're crossing the prevailing wind, they're naturally going to take a lot more wind and become a sail. You know, keeping things down on the ground. There's negatives to that because, you know, the slugs and the bugs and things are down there too, and the little birds find it easier to pick the cherry tomatoes. But when things are laying down flat, they're far less susceptible to storm damage. And things that, of course, are under the ground, like taro, like peanuts, like sweet potatoes, like regular potatoes, carrots, you know, all daikon, all of these crops are very resistant to hurricanes. Even if it rips the tops off of them, they're probably still down underneath there. Jicama, another good one, you know. Plants that form their crops mostly underneath the soil. Definitely good hurricane proofing in the garden. keeping your seeds high and dry someplace, because you never know when they could get swamped, and then you won't be able to replant after the disaster. But again, where the heck is Hector? Because look at this weather. I got my sunglasses on out here. This is supposed to be a disaster. I just had to turn the camera off because a friend from Chicago called up to find out if we're still alive. I said, yeah, I'm out in the backyard shooting a video about the hurricane that it didn't happen. So anyway, not to belittle any of this, but if there ever was a time when it was appropriate to have a hurricane party, come on down. Because we got nothing better to do but sit around, wait for this thing to pass, and party down, party down. Yeah. Alrighty, well, where the heck is Hector anyway? Hang loose, aloha, and stay out of the way of them hurricanes.